You think you can't afford to travel, but here's the real truth nobody tells you: you can't afford not to. Let me explain what I mean. Because this isn't another video about budget hacks or how to find cheap flights. This is about something that happens inside your brain when you finally leave the place you grew up in. Something that quietly destroys the invisible ceiling you've been living under your entire life. And most people never even realize it's happening to them. I want you to think about the last time you made a financial decision out of fear. Not logic fear. Maybe you didn't ask for that raise because people like you don't do that. Maybe you turned down an opportunity because it felt too big, too far, too risky. Maybe you looked at someone successful and thought, yeah, but they're different. That's not for me. That thought, that's your poor mindset talking. And it has nothing to do with how much money is in your bank account right now. Here's what the research actually shows and what I've seen play out in real life over and over again. The people who break out of scarcity thinking, the ones who go from paycheck to paycheck anxiety to genuine financial confidence, almost always have one thing in common. At some point, they had an experience that showed them the world was bigger than they thought. And for a shocking number of them, that experience was travel. Not luxury travel, not first-class flights to the Maldives. Sometimes it was a weekend in a city they'd never been to. A month in Southeast Asia on a shoestring budget. A road trip where everything went wrong and they figured it out anyway. Let me tell you what actually happens to your brain when you travel, because this is where it gets interesting. When you stay in the same environment your whole life, your brain builds a very specific model of reality. What's possible, what's normal, what people like you do or don't do. Neuroscientists call this a mental schema, basically a filter through which you interpret everything. And the problem with that filter is it's built from a very limited data set. Your neighborhood, your family, your social circle, maybe your city. But the moment you land somewhere new, somewhere where the rules are different, where people live completely differently, where money works differently, where strangers are generous or rude or strange in ways you didn't expect, your brain is forced to do something uncomfortable. It's forced to update. It has to let go of assumptions it didn't even know it was holding. That's not metaphor. That's literally neuroplasticity in action. And here's why this matters for money specifically. The poor mindset, and I want to be clear, this has nothing to do with moral failure, it's just a set of learned beliefs. The poor mindset is built on a few core ideas. The world is zero-sum. Resources are scarce. Risk is dangerous. Success is for other people. The system is rigged against me. Now, some of those beliefs are partially true. The system is rigged in a lot of ways. Scarcity is real for a lot of people. I'm not dismissing any of that. But here's what travel does. It shows you viscerally in your body, not just intellectually, that those beliefs aren't universal laws. They're local conditions. You go to a country where people with a fraction of your income are running thriving small businesses and seem genuinely happy. You meet a 24-year-old who figured out how to fund a year abroad by freelancing online, while you're still convincing yourself remote work isn't real. You watch street vendors in Bangkok negotiate with the confidence of Wall Street traders. You realize that this is just how things work is only true in the specific zip code where you learned it. That realization that your limitations are geographic and cultural, not personal and permanent, that is worth more than any financial literacy course you'll ever take. And then something else happens. You start to problem solve differently. Travel, especially travel that doesn't go according to plan, missed trains, language barriers, getting scammed, getting lost, running out of budget, travel forces you to think resourcefully. Not because you're some enlightened adventurer, but because you have no choice. You're in a foreign country and you have to figure it out. That skill transfers. It transfers directly into your financial life, your career, your relationships. People who have navigated hard moments in unfamiliar places develop a baseline confidence. I've been in worse situations, and I found a way through that people who have never left their comfort zone simply don't have. Not because they're less capable, but because they've never been forced to discover their own capability. This is 2026, and I want to talk about why this matters right now more than it ever has. Because the economy has shifted in ways that reward exactly the kind of thinking travel builds. The most valuable skills in the current market, adaptability, cross-cultural communication, creative problem-solving, comfort with ambiguity, these are not skills you develop in a classroom. They're not on any certificates. And they're not something you can fake in an interview. The people thriving right now are people who have trained themselves to be comfortable with uncertainty, who can walk into an unfamiliar situation and find opportunity in it instead of threat, who don't need everything to be figured out before they take the first step. Sound familiar? That's the traveler's mindset. And it's also, increasingly, the wealth builder's mindset. Here's another thing nobody talks about: the network effect of travel. The connections you make when you travel, especially if you're staying in hostels, parking spaces, doing slow travel, are disproportionately with people who have already broken out of conventional thinking. People who decided at some point that the default path wasn't the only path. Those people introduce you to ideas, opportunities, and possibilities that your hometown network would never surface. In 2026, with remote work normalized, with digital nomad visas now available in over 60 countries, with entire cities in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America basically optimized for location-independent workers, the barrier to experiencing this has never been lower. You can spend 3 months in Tbilisi or Chiang Mai or Medellin for less money than 3 months of rent in any major American or Western European city. And while you're there, surrounded by other people who made an unconventional choice, building skills, building network, building evidence that the world doesn't actually end when you color outside the lines, you are fundamentally changing the operating system running in the background of every decision you make. Let's get specific about what that looks like after you come home. People who travel, especially people who travel on a budget and manage their money across currencies and unexpected expenses, consistently report a shift in how they relate to money. Not just that they're more careful with it, but that they're less afraid of it. Less afraid of losing it because they've proven to themselves they can handle loss. Less attached to accumulating it as a form of security because they've seen that security can come from other places: skills, flexibility, relationships. And counterintuitively, that reduced fear makes them better at building wealth. Because the biggest mistake most people make with money isn't spending too much on lattes. It's making decisions from panic. Selling when the market drops. Staying in a bad job because the paycheck feels safe. Not starting the business because what if it fails? Fear is the most expensive thing in your financial life. And travel is one of the few experiences that systematically reduces it. I also want to address the obvious objection, because if you're watching this and you're thinking, okay, but I genuinely don't have the money to travel, I hear you. And I want to push back gently but honestly. Most people who say they can't afford to travel have never actually sat down and calculated what it would cost. They've just assumed it's expensive because expensive travel is what gets shown in media and advertising. But a week in Portugal, a month in Vietnam, a long weekend in Mexico, these are accessible at price points most people in developed countries can reach with a few months of intentional saving. More importantly, the question isn't whether you can afford to travel right now. The question is whether the version of you that's never challenged their assumptions, never updated their mental model of what's possible, never felt the physical sensation of figuring something out in a foreign country, whether that version of you is going to make the financial decisions that get you where you want to go. Because the math on that is pretty clear. The cost of a plane ticket is a one-time expense. The cost of keeping a limited mindset is paid every single year, in every salary negotiation you lose, every opportunity you talk yourself out of, every risk you don't take because you've never had evidence that you could survive the downside. The real luxury isn't business class. The real luxury is a brain that's been shown by direct experience, not by YouTube videos, that the world is larger and more full of possibility than you were originally taught to believe. Travel doesn't fix your finances. It fixes the thinking that's been quietly sabotaging your finances without you even knowing it. And once you see it, you genuinely cannot unsee it. That's the thing about breaking your mental model open. You can't put it back. The ceiling doesn't grow back. The assumptions that used to feel like facts start to feel like what they always were, just somebody else's story about what was possible. A story you absorbed before you were old enough to question it. You are not your zip code. You are not your parents' income. You are not the economy you were born into. But you might need to get on a plane to really believe that.